So, welcome everyone. I am delighted to see so many people here. Isn't it amazing? I think it's a real testament to the times that we live in and how things are changing and the real need for change. The fact that there's so many people in this room, I think it says something. So, without further ado, I'll get right to it. But before getting into the presentation, actually, welcome. Okay. Thanks for coming. I put in a bit of effort, and it's all worthwhile when you see so many people turning up. It's great. So thank you, sincerely. So before we start, the exits are located at the back there and out the front where you came in. The toilets are just down the hall and to the left. I don't know if you're aware of open space, but one of the principles of open space is the law of 2 feet, and the law of 2 feet is if you're not learning and you don't feel like you're contributing, then go somewhere else. Go outside the back, have a rest, have a breather, come back in. You're not obliged to stay for the whole thing. This is an invitation, so don't feel under any pressure to stick it out, And there'll be a follow-up email. So I'll be sending out the presentation and also putting the video up on YouTube, hopefully, if we're able to sync the audio and the video. What I was trying to do with with Nisha's help was specify whether people wanted to be CC'd or BCC'd into the follow-up email, because my idea is that there's probably some people in this room who want to set up an alternative school in Dublin, and it might be handy for people to be able to connect with each other. I actually think that's probably just as, if not more valuable than the information that I'm going to convey in my presentation. So if you'd like to be CC'd into the follow-up email so other people can reply to that and say, I'm thinking of doing it, I'm having another meeting, a follow-up one to this, just let us know, let Nisha know at the door. Okay. Also, I forgot to put a donations box on the door when people are coming in. So if you'd like to donate to Jigsaw, that'd be great, because they're a really good space and they provide their services for free oftentimes. So they're providing it free tonight, so it's donations rather than pay in, I suppose it's nice that you pay on the way out. You can judge the value of the presentation yourselves, you know what I mean? So we'll have the presentation. I'm not going to take any questions during the presentation, okay? If you have any questions, just write them down and I'll take them at the end, because I don't want to break the flow. I'm a little bit nervous about it, and I just want to get it over with. And then we'll have the questions afterwards, and then at the close of the presentation should be in about half an hour's time, 40 minutes time maybe. And then I was thinking we might have an icebreaker and people can chat to each other, because I imagine if you're in this room, you probably have something to talk to each other about already, So if people want to stick around for that, you're more than welcome. Right. Here we go. So what is my background? Right. I've completed 2 undergraduate degrees, one in applied psychology, and I did a joint degree in English and mathematics, and I topped that off with a postgraduate diploma in education. That only took me about 8 years. Way too long in college. And then I worked in 3 different democratic schools. I worked in Summerhill. That's me there. Right at the back, that kind of guy looking in there, that's me, right there. So it's probably the most famous alternative school in the world. It was set up in 1921 by A.S. Neal. It's a private boarding school in rural Suffolk, and it currently has 75 students. It's democratically run, and the thing that people remember about Summerhill is that classes are optional. The kids don't go to lessons unless they want to. But they still have teachers. I was the English teacher there for 2 years. And then I left. I left because I wanted to set up a different type of school again. I wanted to set up, before I move on, there's a really good docudrama on Summerhill. The state inspection board tried to shut down Summerhill. And there was a whole drama about it. They went to court, and the kids went to court, and they had a school meeting in the courtroom. It was amazing. And they did a whole drama on it. And it's a docudrama, so it's partly fictional, but it really does capture what Summerhill is like. if you want to get a taste of what Summerhill is like, I'd recommend that docudrama. So after Summerhill, I went to the Sudbury School Paris. It came out of a very successful school called École Dynamique, which is France's first Sudbury school. It wasn't the first democratic school, it was the first Sudbury school, which is a particular type of democratic school. We only opened with 2 students. I flew over to Paris on January 1st, and we opened the school in March. It was crazy busy, but we only opened with 2 students, and now it has 14. It's based on the Sudbury model. It's run democratically, it's privately funded, and has no scheduled lessons. So Sudbury schools don't have any teachers. That's kind of the hallmark of what Sudbury is all about. The students run their school, and everybody's a teacher and everybody's a learner. They don't make the distinction between the two in terms of adults and students. So then halfway through that year, I moved over to Ireland because, as it happens, you know, life throws you curveballs, and I got this email from a group of parents down in Bray who were having their first public meeting about a democratic school they were setting up. So I went over and attended their public meeting, and decided there and then that I wanted to become part of their team, because it was really very inspiring, and you know, it was going to be the first democratic school in Ireland. You know, that's really exciting. So I moved over, and we opened in September in a small semi-detached house in Sandyford. It currently has 14 students. We've got a waiting list. We were constricted by the size of the building that we were in. But it was kind of good in some ways, because it got the community off to a really good start, you know. And we have a proportional fee system, which ranges from 2,400 to 12,000, and it's based on your gross household income. So that's before tax has been taken off. It's the 12% of the gross household income, but I'll get into that later. And just so you know, we're moving from that house down to a place called Kilpetter, just south of Bray, for the September 2017. So that's my background. Okay, so 2 important questions that I always kind of try and think about when I'm engaging in organising or engaging in any kind of activity really is, what is the purpose of insert thing here, and what is the minimum? Okay, so what is the purpose of this presentation? Well, the purpose of me giving this presentation is to empower ye guys. I want to show ye that setting up an alternative school in Ireland is very, very possible, and it's surprising that there isn't more of them, frankly. And then what is the minimum required? Well, that's what my presentation is all about. I'm going to give you what I consider to be the minimum necessary to set up a school. I'm not giving you, you know, what would be great. It'd be great if alternative schools were like this or this. I'm saying, like, look, this is the minimum you need. That's all you need. Okay? So what is an alternative school? If I'm trying to empower you to set up alternative schools, what is an alternative school? Well, to answer that question, I first have to get into the kind of legal stuff, okay? So I'm going to go into the presentation is kind of 2 halves. One is the kind of legal side, and then the other side is the kind of like practicalities of how you can get a team and work together to establish a school, okay? So I've written a very detailed blog post on the legal landscape with regard to education in Ireland, which is available on the Wicklow Sudbury School blog, and there'll be a link to that sent out. So what follows is a very, very brief summary. It's not as brief as I probably would have liked, but I didn't want to compromise the story of, you know, the legal basis for what we're doing. So there are 2 main pieces of legislation when it comes to education in Ireland. One is the Constitution, and one is the Education Welfare Act 2000. In a nutshell, we are so lucky. I cannot emphasize enough how lucky we are in terms of the legislation we have in Ireland, lads. I have friends who have set up schools that have been shut down. In Denmark, in Germany. In Germany, homeschooling is illegal. In Denmark, the inspection body is so focused on what they believe a school should be that they can't think outside of that, and they shut down anything that even is remotely alternative. And it's taken my friend Peter and Crystal 15 years and 3 schools to be able to work with the inspectorate body in a way that allows them to try and provide the type of school that they want to provide for their students. So it is not difficult to establish and run an independent non-state school in this country. I know because we're doing it. Okay. Right, yeah. So why is this? Well, the reason why it's easier in Ireland is because unlike most other countries in Europe, the state is not, within the constitution, it doesn't say that the state is the primary provider of education for the young people of Ireland. It doesn't say that. It says that the state will respect the right of parents to provide the education that they decide for their child. That's unique, as far as I know, in a European context. So, under Article 42.1 of the Constitution, the state guarantees to respect the right and duty of parents to provide, according to their means, for the religious and moral, intellectual, physical and social education of their child. And Article 42.2 states that parents are free to provide this education in their homes, or in private schools, or in schools recognised by the state. It's in the Constitution. You can't trump that. So, now that's the Constitution. What comes out of that? Well, the government, their interpretation of what a minimum standard of education is outlined in the Education Welfare Act 2000, okay? Under the Irish Constitution, parents have to provide an education, but what that education is kind of set out in different documents that I'll go through now. But what the state interprets as a minimum standard of education is in the Education Welfare Act, and it's 12 criteria, right? And these criteria include teaching the state curriculum, being inspected by and abiding by all directions issued by the Department of Education. So essentially, if you want to get any state funding for schools, you need to abide by all these criteria, including the Department of Education issuing circulars saying, this is the ratio of students to teachers, this is how big your rooms have to be, anything they want. They basically have you by the balls, basically, if you're taking their money, okay? But if you do not meet any of those 12 criteria, if you just decide that you don't want to do that, you don't want to get state funds, you are termed underneath the Act a non-recognised school, because you're not recognised under that Act. But I prefer to call them alternative or independent schools, okay? And that's what an alternative school is. When I mean I'm trying to empower you to set up alternative schools, I mean alternative, non-recognised schools under the Act. So that is schools that won't be trying to take state funds, because if you're trying to take state funds, then you're trying to be a state school. You're going to compromise what your vision is, in my opinion, so incredibly that it won't even be like an alternative school anymore. I don't think it's possible if you want to get state money. That's the bad news. Sorry. Okay. So if you're going to set up an alternative school, it's going to have to be privately funded. That's as far as I can see anyway. So, under the Education Welfare Act, parents must ensure their children receive a minimum standard of education. Here's that phrase again. Under Section 16 of the Act, a document was published which outlines the guidelines for how this certain minimum standard of education is assessed in alternative schools. So you had, under the Education Welfare Act, you had what the state interpretation of the minimum standard is, and now, which is very specific, and now it has a broader definition of what that certain minimum standard of education might look like in an alternative school setting, right? And this document is called the Guidelines on the Assessment of Education in Places Other than Recognised Schools. Okay? And that includes homeschooling. So these guidelines describe a certain minimum of education in the context of an alternative schools, and they have absolutely lovely criteria. Like, for example, the education should be suited to the age, ability, aptitude and personality of the child. and be responsive to the child's individual needs, and should take cognizance of the areas of learning that are of interest to the child, and should ensure that his or her personal potential is enhanced and not suppressed. I mean, this is a really progressive piece of legislation. You know, this good stuff just keeps going and going. And these are just guidelines. This isn't even legislation. So it's all good, basically. So these guidelines also set out who carries out the inspections of alternative schools, right? And that is TUSLA, the Child and Family Agency. So what does this mean, right? This is the punchline. This means that unlike every single other country in Europe, alternative schools in Ireland do not get inspected by the Department of Education. They get inspected by TUSLA, right? So you don't have inspectors who've been 20 or 30 years in the education game coming in with their glasses on, you know, traditional paradigm glasses on, trying to interpret what's going on in alternative schools. That's not what's happening. What you have is you have inspectors from TUSLA, which is the Family and Child Agency, whose number one kind of focus is always the welfare of the child. And they're trying to ensure that these kids are okay, like they're having a good time and their well-being is taken care of and they're flourishing. That's a very different orientation. And that's why I just don't understand why we don't have more alternative schools in Ireland. Because we've worked with them in the Wicklow Sudbury school. We had our first inspection. Actually, we're termed a collective homeschooling group at the moment, just kind of to get around it. But TUSLA know what we're about. They know we're setting up a school. They've come in, they've talked to us. All the parents were talked to at the same time, and they're being really supportive because they love what we do. Because we really care about the kids and we have their well-being at the centre of what we're trying to do. So, what is the purpose of this presentation again? It's to empower you guys to set up alternative schools. Okay? So I'm going to, now that we have the legislative context sorted out, you can now I'll now go into kind of the practicalities of how ye can set up alternative schools. How are you actually? I think you can sit here if you want. Yeah. So this is the format for the presentation, right? I said I'd start out with the punchline, then I go to the 4 steps, and then more detail on each of the 4 steps. Okay? So the punchline is, yeah, like I said already, setting up an alternative school is a lot easier than you think. Okay? So here it is. Here's the 4 steps. You find the right people. You agree on a shared vision. You acknowledge power and set up a solid legal foundation for your vision. And then you achieve a critical mass of people who want to live that vision. So, the first 2 steps are interchangeable. You can create a comprehensive vision by yourself, set out in a kind of manifesto style thing, and then you can share that vision and other people can come on board. Or you can find a group of people who seem to kind of share your perspective already and then build a vision with them. Okay? I'm going to be dealing with these 2 things separately, but I just kind of wanted to emphasize that sometimes it's not linear. This process isn't linear. So, assembling a kick-ass team. There we go. The magic number is 5 to 7. Yeah, I've been doing activist work now for a decade, and I can tell you that if you want to achieve something good, you want a project that you want to work on, 5 to 7 is the magic number. Getting lower than 5, it's a lot of work now. There's only 4 of you, 3 of you. It's pretty lonely. It's not really a group. It's just 3 people, 4 people. But if you get 5 or 7, you have a more dynamic thing going on now. People's energies might fluctuate, but that's okay because other people can pick up the slack and stuff. Start going over 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now you have kind of 2 groups forming. You have like an inner group, which is kind of more hardcore, active, and then kind of a periphery, and the periphery isn't as involved and might feel a bit excluded and all that kind of jazz, you know. 5 to 7, that's what you want. So these people are resourceful, good communicators, capable organisers, have small egos, and don't mind getting their hands dirty. So what do? You have meetings. For something like a school, you need to meet a minimum of once a week. All right? Just put an evening aside from now until the school is open. Just go. For us, it was Monday mornings actually. Every single Monday morning for 2 years. I came in at the end. I came in July. Actually, that's not true. I was doing Skype from Paris in February. But Ciara Breheny, who initiated the Wicklow Sudbury School project, the way she put it was, Ciara's story is very interesting actually. I'll take a moment to tell it. Ciara has 4 kids. She's got 2 older kids and 2 younger kids. And her older kids kind of had a bit of a hard time with school, right? And I'll never forget the way Ciara put it. She said she had 2 younger kids then. There was a bit of a gap, And she started to see what traditional education was like and what it could do to people, And she said Mother Bear kind of kicked in, for the younger 2. And so she wanted to create something different. She didn't know how she was going to do it, but she wanted to do it. She wanted to create an alternative school for her 2 younger kids. So she just started talking to people. She just talked to people. Talked to people in Tesco's, talked to people everywhere, on the street. And people were giving people understood, because everybody knows the traditional education enough said, right? Right? So group formed, started meeting every Monday. Okay? And they did that for about 2 years. And now we have a school. So what you do is you come together as a group. First of all, you decide how you're going to make decisions. Right? You're going to vote, there's consensus, sociocracy, whatever, but you need a decision-making tool. And you all need to be clear on it. Okay? And then you need to record your decisions. Because people might make decisions, but then, it's a few months on and somebody kind of thinks, oh, I thought we decided this. Oh, I thought we decided that, though. You have to have a record. You have to go back and see, no, this is what we decided exactly. Okay? And when you're meeting week to week, you have to keep an action list. And one person has to be responsible for it. What do I mean by action list? I mean this thing here. It's very simple. Just have an action, whatever it might be, set up a Facebook page, whatever. You have an owner. You have a date it needs to be completed by, and then its current status. It's really, really simple. Okay? And you just check your action list at the beginning of every meeting. And that means that actions that need to be completed don't fall through the cracks. It's simple, but absolutely beautiful. And you won't appreciate it until you're about 6 months in. Oh, and yeah, so the action list is very related to, the culture you want to establish within the meetings. This is really important. Okay? You want to establish a culture of doing what you're motivated to do. Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want to create in the school, right? You want kids doing what they want to do. And you don't want them doing it out of guilt or feeling pressure or stressed or whatever. And you kind of need to embody that in your meetings, You only do what you want to do. If it doesn't feel right, you don't do it. You don't put your hand up and go, oh, I'll do that, right? Everyone has their role, okay? Some are good communicators, some are good organizers. Don't expect everybody to do the same work, because that will just lead to resentment. Everyone's different. There was one group I was involved in, and there was a member there, didn't really say much. Didn't say much at all, actually. Like, week in, week out. And I heard like a little bit of rumblings from another person going, oh, he's not doing that much, And I was like, look, everybody's got their role. You do what you want to do. Don't be judging other people about what they're doing or not doing, And we were months in, didn't have a building, came to a meeting, and he said one line, and it was like, I've got a building. And that was it. That was his role. That's what he had to bring. Okay? And visit schools together. Okay? You need to visit the type of schools that you want to create, okay? That's a really important one. All right, so agree on a shared vision. Do you want to set up a Steiner school, a Forest school, a democratic school? What's the age range going to be? Where is the school going to be located? Will there be a green space? Will the students have to attend lessons and do exams? If so, what subjects? How will the school rules be decided? What process will be used if the school rules are broken? All of this has to be sorted out. All right? So I'm just going to put it in there. Yeah, you might find inspiration on the dragon dreaming process. You can Google that later. Instead of describing your goals and where you want to go, try to find the core question you want to answer. It's kind of more open. You know that thing where you're supposed to, when you're trying to facilitate a person, they're talking about something difficult. You don't ask closed questions like why. You ask open questions like how does that make you feel and stuff. It's kind of the same thing. You ask an open question, and then the way you answer that can change over time. And then you're like less judgmental about like what's fitting into your vision or not, So the reason why I call this presentation How to Set Up Alternative Schools is, I'm a democratic education head. That's my background. But I'm about freedom of education. I'm about people setting up schools, whatever kind of schools they want to set up. And that might involve democratic processes. It might not. But that's my background, but I don't want to be restrictive, So when you start to answer, whatever the type of question that you ask will be reflective of the kind of vision that you want to create. And you mightn't be able to think of it now, but that's okay. Don't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. Other people are doing this already, okay? Attend gatherings in, there's the European Democratic Education Community. That's kind of how I got into this game. It's an annual conference. It's held in different locations all over Europe, where all democratic schools come together. Go there. It's a week-long thing. Absolutely amazing experience. And also visit schools together. Did I mention visit schools together? Yeah. Okay. Agree on a shared vision. Yeah. But sometimes visions are not compatible. And that's okay. Group splitting are often a necessary and very healthy step. And I've heard of groups feeling like they really kind of graduated to the next level when it came after the split. That the split kind of helped them define like what they were really about and what their vision was. So don't be afraid to walk away. Don't like stay in a relationship too long, And I put in one direction because, why not? Right, next step. Let's talk about power. Sneaky stuff. Power. What is power? Well, power kind of in its simplest definition is like the ability to decide stuff, to make decisions. So who are the ones going to be making decisions in your school? This is my democratic education coming out at me now. You can tell, And essentially, when you're designing the vision of your school, you need to ask the question, how much say are the kids going to have in governing their own school? Right? And, I have my perspective on how much that should be. Everything. But, I understand that other people might not share that perspective. Whatever their answer to that question, it needs to be defined very, very clearly. The kids need to know, the facilitators need to know, the staff, whatever, the teachers, whatever you want to call them, and the people who are directors of the company need to know what your remit for decision making is. Because clarity is not nice. Clarity makes people feel unsafe and not as free to flourish. And this decision making needs to be built into the constitution of your legal vehicle. What do I mean by legal vehicle? Well, the legal vehicle is the kind of form, the legal form that your school is going to take, whether it's a club, a cooperative, company limited by guarantee without share capital. Also, there's more restrictions on those type of forms if you become a charity, right? So there's pros and cons to every single type of legal vehicle. Go to thewheel.ie for advice. Talk to me. Talk to my friend Sonia Kyo, who did tons of work on the legal vehicle for the Wicklow Sudbury School. And it might change over time. Like, we're a club, but we're probably going to become a company limited by guarantee without share capital. Governance structure. The governance structure is kind of like how your school works day to day. Like, do you have a principal? or not? You know, if you do have a principle, why and what did they decide? You know, what kind of power structure what kind of power do they have? What kind of decisions can they make? What can they tell people to do? You know, all that needs to be written down. And importantly, that governance structure sits on top of your legal foundation. So what I mean is, like, your law book or your governance thing is referenced in your constitution. So, last step, finding a critical mass of people who want to live the vision. So what is a critical mass? A critical mass is the number of people you have to hit before it starts feeling like a community. Like a living, breathing magic is kind of going on here. People are living their lives and flourishing and stuff. And that's a bit of a PR exercise. I say it's a PR exercise, but it's a PR exercise and also a kind of filter system as well. So, like, it's very important. The title is very important. Find a critical mass of people who want to live the vision. That implies that they know the vision and understand the vision and that they want to live that. You have to ensure that they understand that vision, because a lot of people know what they don't want, which is traditional education. They might know what they want, though, you know what I mean? And they might just jump at your thing and get on board, and then they're 6 months in, they're like, wait, but this isn't what I expected. That's on you. You have to inform them. And that means pushing back, going, oh, maybe read a bit more. Maybe come to more public meetings, you know, that kind of stuff. And then when they have to prove to you that they understand what you're about. And then you can be like, okay, yeah, fair enough then. That's the admissions process. So hold public screenings. Being Becoming is a great film for, like, knocking the corners off people in terms of, like, their notions about traditional education. I'll leave it at that. Host public meetings where you communicate your vision to the public and where people can meet you. Because people don't really trust ideas, they trust people. So they have to see you. They have to see that you're sane, you know, that you're not some loony. And that because they're going to trust their child with you, you know. So they have to see who's going to be the person with their child. Invest some money in Facebook advertising. Don't, like, posters, you can put in tons of money into posters. Don't put your money into posters. If you don't have that much money, put it into Facebook. I know, it's terrible. But yeah, it's effective. Create a professional looking website and invest in search engine optimization. Yeah, I mean, your website is your front of shop nowadays. Maybe create a promotional video, you know, if you've got somebody on the team who's like about that, cool. And then open. I opened with 2 students in France. That was interesting. People are more likely, there's some people who are like kind of early adopters, I think is the term. Like they'll be the kind of adventuring type. They'll be the person who gets the new type of phone that's really experimental. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody's going to put their child into a school that is just set up, like at the very, very start. Other people kind of like hold back and see what happens, you know, which is understandable because it's your child, you know. So sometimes it's good to just open, even if you only have a few kids, and then other people will come, you know, build it and they will come, that kind of thing. So general advice, visit schools together. Talk to people. A wise person once said to me, just talk to people. You know, just talk to people. And that works for talking to random people on the side of the street and talking to founders like me and the rest of the Wicklow Sudbury founding team, and going to places where you can find other people to talk to. But just talk to people. There's no book on how to do this. There's actually not, like. Co-founding, oh yeah, and be compassionate with yourself. That's actually related to the next point, which is co-founding a school is a real journey of personal growth and exploration, and be open to it. And kind of what I've kind of realized is be compassionate to yourself, you know, because you can put yourself under a lot of pressure and heap stress on yourself, and, you know, I learned through this process to be more compassionate with myself and enjoy the adventure, because that's what it is. You know, you're not living the normal 9 to 5, putting your kids in a state school life if you're here and you're deciding to get involved with this. And that's an adventure. So enjoy it. And, you know, this is where I derive my meaning in my life, you know, helping people to set up alternative schools. So here's my number. And here's my name on Facebook. And if you feel like, you know, you just need to talk to someone, or you're really stressed and you're like, oh my God, you know, just give me a call and I'd be happy to help. So yeah, that's my presentation done.